Hello again, Pastor Michael Jarbo here. Welcome to another edition of Soul Care, conversations to help renew the spirit. I'm glad you're here. Check out today's episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Soul Care. We're so glad that you're tuning in this week. I'm Pastor Colin, and this week is a special episode. We're really excited about the interview we're having this week, especially for me, selfishly, I have to say. Had a mentor a while ago tell me to stay inspired and fired up in ministry, find someone that you can watch from afar that'll keep you excited about ministry. And Matt Miofsky is one of those people for me. So it's cool to get to connect Matt. And Matt is the pastor of The Gathering in the St. Louis area, multi-site. Is it four campuses now, 4 or 5 campuses now?
Yeah, we are. Well, now there's just one campus, and it's all
right,
online,
sure, like everybody else. Yeah,
we hope to return soon to multi-campus life.
Before times, it was multi-campus. Yeah, and so Matt, y'all planted The Gathering in 2006, right?
That's correct.
So
we're 2006.
Right on, cool. And so we're in the same tradition, United Methodist Church, and so connected in that way. And that's kind of how I found out about Matt. Saw him speak at a worship conference in North Carolina. I don't remember how many years ago that was, but you and Don Salier's a professor that we share from our seminary days, just at different times. So that's how I found out about you, and just have kept up with the work that you're doing in St. Louis and at The Gathering ever since. And so thanks for accepting the invitation, and glad that you're here today.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. No, I'm happy to have the chance to talk and interact with other people, even if it's over Zoom.
Right. All the way from St. Louis. So so the first question I just wanted to ask in that same vein is, if someone were to ask you to pitch The Gathering, what y'all do, what your core values are, what your mission is, what you're hoping to accomplish in St. Louis, the kind of backstory of how it got started and where The Gathering came from, what would you say? How would you pitch it to somebody?
Yeah, well, I started The Gathering in 2006. Our official vision was to create a Christian community that's compelling for new generations of people. And I really mean, that's more than just a statement on a page. When we started The Gathering, we had a sense that most churches, especially Methodist churches in St. Louis, had been started a long time ago. There were a lot of younger people that had stopped going to church for all sorts of different reasons. They were bored, it was irrelevant, they had been burned by the church, they increasingly saw the church as judgmental or not interested in real life. And we wanted to start a church that would attract new generations of people, not just younger people, but people in general that had kind of church out. So I still think 14 years later, that is very much our mission. I mean, we realize that there are a whole lot of people for a whole lot of reasons who have been turned off to church. And we are really dedicated to engaging those people and saying, hey, maybe you had a past bad experience of church or irrelevant experience of church, but maybe you're still searching for some kind of spiritual connection with God. And we want to be a place where you can explore that. And that's really where we've had success. For church people, I put it a little bit more specifically that I think we've really found a sweet spot in St. Louis where we've been able to fuse, I think, sort of some of the passion and quality that people had experienced in evangelical churches, but with some of the theology that was more open, that I think is a hallmark of kind of United Methodism and maybe some of the main line. And so we've been able to combine those two things in a way that just a lot of churches weren't doing and still aren't doing. And I think that's resonated with a whole new generation of people who love Jesus and they want to understand Scripture and they want to have a close relationship with Christ, but they're questioning increasingly some of the political social dogma of the traditional evangelical or conservative church. And we still very much see people who are like that and wonder if there's any community for them.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that really inspires me about The Gathering is there's kind of this, I think, myth of you have to be that brand of evangelical to be a growing church and be a vibrant church. And I feel like The Gathering kind of bucks that trend. We look at the statistics of growing United Methodist churches, and y'all are near the top of the list, and kind of showing that isn't the case and doesn't have to be the case, and probably ought not be the case. So just to put you on the spot a little bit, kind of like, back to like pre-COVID times, where is the gathering kind of like growth wise and numbers wise in the folks that you're reaching in St. Louis?
Yeah, fortunately, I mean, we were still growing. We were having our best year. 2020 was our best and worst year. It was our best year. For 14 years in a row, we've grown. So, before COVID hit, we were pushing into the high 1800s in terms of in-person worship attendance across 3 sites. Our 4th site was in a bar, and they unfortunately tore the bar down, but we were in the process of hopefully starting a 4th and 5th site. So we had a lot going. And then obviously COVID hit, which we'll talk more about, but still our reach in terms of online worship is in the thousands. So it has grown. And I think that it's not just about numbers, but I think it's felt good to know that a church can break out of some of those, ruts that we've fallen into, which churches think that they need to be yet evangelical, both in theology and in politics and in social issues, or if they're quote progressive, they need to be progressive theologically, socially. And there's not many churches that are willing to sort of mix that together and attract people from kind of all over the spectrum. And that's really been the gathering. We have people who would describe themselves as conservatives, both theologically and politically, progressives theologically and politically. We just have a view of the gospel that, we believe that Jesus deeply matters. And what we want to do is help people to have a relationship with Christ that transforms their lives. And we believe that God asks us to look at our world with critical, compassionate, thoughtful ways, which often leads to more nuanced understandings of issues than sometimes the church has been known for. So it's been great for us. And it's surprising to me that after 14 years of doing this, there aren't more churches willing to do it. But I think churches have such a tough time rethinking some of that, or I think oftentimes they're afraid of offending or alienating people that have been a part of the church. They just stay quiet on social or political issues, or they are afraid. A lot of pastors are afraid to ask people to think about some of these things in a new way.
Right. Another follow-up question to that, we actually had a conversation, a clergy staff today, about ramping up to an upcoming election and then the kind of aftermath of one. And like we're kind of we're in an urban area too. We're in Houston, and so we have people on kind of both sides of the aisle as well. And I know that the gathering y'all have had pretty explicitly political sermon series, not partisan but political, and that you're addressing the political atmosphere or whatever. What do you think, like, how do you think let me rephrase that. What do you think the best way of addressing both sides of the spectrum, the people you can probably visualize them when you're preaching, even if you're preaching virtually, like how do you speak to both of them helpfully without alienating either of them?
Yeah, I think that over the course of the past 14 years, I have tried hard to lean into difficult topics, whether that be money or sex or politics. And I've found really a few lessons to be helpful across any of those issues. I mean, one is, I think that if you can try to understand where people with different viewpoints are coming from and preach in such a way that shows that you've taken a lot of time to understand, I think that goes a long way.
Right.
I think the more humble you are with people who disagree with you, the more you're apt to get them to listen to what you might have to say.
Right.
I think when it comes to particularly controversial or challenging issues, the more we can be about lifting up Scripture and Jesus, and the less it can be about us kind of grinding out our own particular viewpoint, I think the better. So when I preach about some of these things, yes, I have an opinion that's been deeply informed by Scripture, but I want to take people to the Scripture, not immediately to my opinion about it. And I think the last thing I would say about that is I think creating trust with your people over time allows you to challenge them more. So as you build credibility and trust with the congregation, they're going to give you permission to push them more because they trust that you're doing it in love. So I think all those things have been lessons that I've learned, that when I'm going to dive into something, I'm going to be honest with people about what we're talking about. I'm going to say what I think, but I'm also going to show that I've spent a lot of time to try to understand where different people are coming from. I want it to be about scripture and about Christ first and foremost. And at the end of the day, I want to leave people challenged to think more than try to persuade people to believe whatever it is that I've believed. And I think people have appreciated that they've come up to me and said things like, Matt, I disagree with you, but I appreciated the way you handled that. And it gave me something to think about. To me, that's a win.
Yeah. Big win. That's awesome. Great. Well, you already mentioned that 2020 was set to be like a big, growing, exciting year.
Right.
And so everything has kind of changed and we're having to pivot. We have no choice but to address things differently and do things differently. So that being said, what are you most excited about at the gathering right now, even 8 months into a pandemic world?
Well, I'd say there's two things. One is immediate, something that we're seeing, and one is something we're not yet seeing, but that I'm excited to think about. It's exciting to see the reach geographically. We've, Wesley had that famous quote, "The world is my parish."
Right.
And I think right now it's literally our parish, like because it's online. We have people listening from all over the place. And so just trying to think through that and grapple with what it means to be a church for people that don't live geographically close has been a challenge, but it's also been exciting to think about the reach that our church has had. I would say that the second one that has me excited, but I don't know where it's going to lead yet, is I really do think that something is going to significantly change for the future of the church because of this moment. And I know a lot of different people are already speculating on what that is. I don't yet know what it is, but I really do believe that we are undergoing a change that the church has desperately needed. I mean, the trajectory that United Methodism was on just wasn't working. It wasn't feasible. We were declining year after year. And as hard as this is right now, I am excited and hopeful that the world is changing in such a way that's going to force and really allow the church to be creative in ways we haven't been able to be. And I don't know what that's going to lead to. Right. I don't pretend or naively believe it's going to be equally beneficial to all churches, but I think in the long run, it's going to, for our institution, we actually needed something like this in order to really think collectively about what it is we're doing and how we're doing it.
Yeah. Well, you kind of touched on the there's been some opportunity, some ways of seeing that are different. There's also been, of course, a lot of challenges. I keep thinking back to the weekend, the first weekend we didn't have in-person worship, and the kind of question is when are we going to go back? So there's been some bright moments and some challenging moments. So just kind of want to ask you both sides of that coin. What's been the brightest moment of ministry for the gathering and for you personally during the pandemic, and what's been probably the most challenging or difficult part of all this?
Yeah, the brightest, that reach that I told you about before. I also think during the pandemic, and as we've been online, I've really gotten to see what the church means to different people. I think because they don't have it, I've had some of the most authentic notes from people saying, "Hey, I want you to know, thank you for doing this online. This is how much this means to me and how much faith is like an actual lifeline for me." So it's been really encouraging to see that the church matters. Our church has held together. People, I think, and this is not just the gathering, but I think a lot of churches have been surprised at how people have kind of hung in there and stayed engaged, and giving in a lot of places hasn't gone down as much as we thought. And just, I think that's encouraging to pastors to know, okay, people really do care about this, that they really, it can feel so fragile, I think. And the church has proven to be more resilient maybe than we give it credit for. So that's been a bright spot for me. I think the challenging thing, I mean, there's a lot I could name, not seeing people, not having that Sunday morning worship, which for me is kind of both it's the summit and the source, I think, of everything that we do. It's the culmination of all the work we've put in the week before. And it's also the motivation for everything that we're going to do the next week. Right. And without that, it's just strange. I don't get to feel like, okay, all that work we did this past week, we just got to celebrate it and offer it to God. I know we're doing online worship and I believe in that, but it doesn't give me the same feeling. And so I have to search for that elsewhere. I think the other challenge, which is a bit more abstract, is that it was really clear when the pandemic started and when we needed to end weekly worship, virtually every church in the country stopped doing in-person worship within a couple of weeks of each other. But we are not going to have a clear ending of the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's time to go back. So as a result, it's going to be I think a very slow, gradual process of figuring out what life needs to look like now. There's not going to be a collective whistle or bell that rings that says, hey, it's free and clear, go back. And so every church, every individual person is having to figure out how to move forward in the midst of the pandemic. And so it's just really uneven. And I think that's just a great challenge for all of our churches and for us individually.
Yeah, and it extends to more than just church, it seems like, too, of like,
for sure,
when is it going to be the right time to even like do small things like go to the movies or go visit my grandparents or whatever else, just like making those individual choices.
We're all going to have to decide those things for ourselves. And it's going to rob us of kind of a collective sense that it's over. Yeah. And it's going to rob us of that sort of collective sense that we can do this together now.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned like missing the people. We've just recently started reservation in-person worship, and there's just been some people that like, I've probably seen that they've liked things on Facebook or whatever else and engaged with them online, but to see them bodily in person has been really crazy, and just kind of leads well into this next question. There's an African proverb that says, a person becomes a person through other people, whether virtually or in person. Who is someone that's made a significant impact in your life at large and in this season to kind of make you the person you are right now in this moment?
Yeah. Well, I'd say in the moment, one of the reasons the pandemic is so hard is I believe in that proverb. I am such a product of the people that have poured into me and shaped me and come alongside me. And the pandemic in so many ways sort of robs us of the community that that some of us really desperately need. And so it's been strange in the pandemic. I've discovered that I've been more alienated from those people in my life. But I would say that I'm really fortunate to have people close to me. My wife, Jessica, we've been married 21 years. I spend a lot of time with her and we still like each other. And she's the person most responsible for me kind of being who I am. I've also got I'm lucky enough to get to work on a staff where even though I might not be able to interact with a bunch of other people, I have a few people on my staff that I'm working with constantly. And I really do. They're more than just coworkers. They're deep friends. So a couple of pastors and our executive pastor. So I would say that in the pandemic, it's been a close circle of people that are important to me. I think at large, I mean, gosh, it's such a big question, right? For different phases of my life. I think a person in terms of my ministry, I was fortunate enough at Emory, you were talking a little bit about seminary, to have Desmond Tutu as a professor of mine. And he will forever have a mark on me. And I got to know him during that semester of being in class with him. And he really did change my perspective on ministry and on life. And it's somebody that I carry with me. I've carried with me for almost 20 years now.
That's awesome. Yeah, I obviously he wasn't there when I was at Candler, but Dr. Salyers told many great stories about like sharing an office next door to his. And it's like what it would be like to be able to say like, my office was next door to Desmond Tutu's. Pretty.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned your wife and the kind of circle you have around you and your staff, and you kind of learned and learned some things and changed some things personally. What has quarantine in particular taught you about yourself, and how has it affected and how you see and understand ministry too?
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's taught me that I desperately need other people. I knew that about myself, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a pastor, you fantasize sometimes about having a weekend. Like, well, what would it be like to not have to wake up? And well, I've gotten to see, and you know what? It's a pleasant surprise. I actually prefer not having a full weekend. I want to lead on Sunday mornings, and so it's taught me that some of the stuff that is easy to take for granted, or that I can be on the verge of thinking I don't need, I actually do desperately need. And you don't know that until you don't have it. So it's given me a new appreciation for just some of the basics that I've been doing all my life, but that are still deeply meaningful to me. Weekly worship being one of them, being in community with other people, specifically faith community. I think when it comes to the second part of your question, was it taught me about the church?
Yeah, and ministry.
I think, and this is in the good news column, I think it's taught me that people really, sometimes I can tend to think that people don't care that much about church. I think it's hard. During normal times, and pastors know this, we talk about it all the time. It's like, people will skip church for any reason. A sports game, nice weather, bad weather. There's too much going on. There's nothing going on. So they want to take a day off. I mean, just whatever it is, they will skip church for any reason. And you can sometimes wonder, is anything we're doing mattering? Do people really care? Or is this like the lowest priority? And I think we've seen during the pandemic that, no, that's not quite it. I mean, there is a challenge when it comes to, people attending, but that people really do basically care. I've seen a lot of people stay engaged, people who've surprised me, quite frankly, who said, hey, this is really important to me. I'm listening. I'm trying hard to engage. I'm giving my money still to the church. And so I think that it's taught me that the church is more resilient and people care more about it than maybe we sometimes think they do.
Right. Each week we kind of have these questions about what different people are doing. And, we've had pastors and artists and folks in our congregation kind of talk about the work that they do or whatever, especially during this weird season of our lives. But one question we always keep in is this question, and you're probably familiar with it just from John Wesley, this self-examination question, a kind of personal, incisive question. How is it with your soul? So however you want to answer that, as deep as you want to go, how is it with your soul?
Well, I'll tell you, my soul is steady and anchored right now, which I'm glad, because on a daily basis, I can be really up or down. On a weekly basis, I can feel like, hey, this is a hopeful time. We can be creative and innovative. And the next day I'll say, oh my gosh, how long is this going to last, God? I don't feel like anything I'm doing is really connecting or mattering. And I don't know if you've had that feeling, Colin, or a lot of people have wondered. So I have these alternative days where I think, hey, this is hopeful. I think things are good. There's all these possibilities. And other days where I don't know if what I'm doing is mattering to anybody or if I'm effective. And so because daily my feelings can kind of ride up or down, I'm grateful for some things that anchor me that I can return to. My faith, my family. I have great people around me. So this is a longer answer, but I feel like I have some things in my life that anchor me, and that's good because right now my soul is a little up or down depending on the day. And I'll just add one more thing, because I wrote a book called Happy, What It Is and How to Find It. So I've thought a lot about happiness, and I read one theory one time that happiness is basically the cumulative impact of like 8 factors in your life, and it was like your physical health, your mental health, your how you're eating, your financial health, how you like your work, what the status of your family relationships are, what the status of your friendships are. And it was kind of saying that, our temptation is when one thing is hurting, you know, you lose your job, it can affect all the others. Your marriage can go bad. It can affect your mental health. You don't take care of yourself. And the theory was, you know, when one thing takes a hit, the best thing you can do is continue to invest in the things that you can invest in. So fortunately in my life, I'm grateful because I have such strong, I really have, most of those sectors in my life are strong. So while church isn't quite the same and my professional life feels so different and uncertain, I've got some other things in my life that I pay a lot of attention to that help me weather a bad season in one of those sectors.
Well, that's great. Yeah, no, thanks for, you said it was a longer answer, but that's a great answer. And I love that about the kind of we're kind of forced in some way, all of us. That's the collectivist part of it, is like, we're forced to, well, one, live with ourselves. So if there's other things that are awry, they're now really magnified, and now have the opportunity to pay attention to them.
And the learning for me is it's so easy when one thing's going poorly to use that as a reason to not invest in the other things. And I'll admit that it feels like a lot of work sometimes.
Yeah.
To say, man, I am just so worn out from this up and down at work. I don't want to exercise, or I don't want to go talk to a friend, or I don't want to connect with my spouse, or I don't want to have to think about another thing. But I find for me that if I force myself to keep investing in these other sectors, it ends up paying off, and it helps me weather that one that's weak. So
right. Yeah, and you're not gonna like hurt your job's feelings for blaming it for all your problems, you know, but then you're gonna end up hurting everything else in the process, you know. Well, I've shared a little bit at the beginning that we both went to Candler School of Theology at different times, but had some shared professors, and I'm sure some shared experience. And so I included this kind of unique question for this episode of, you know, as we're recording this evening, the Braves will play their first game against the Dodgers. So looking forward to that as a Braves fan. But just wanted to ask you, from one Candler alum to another, what's something you miss about Candler or Atlanta or seminary life, just kind of reminiscing a little bit about that time of your life.
I'll tell you what I miss about, I was one of those rare people that went straight to seminary out of college. So seminary was not just a time of kind of intellectually learning, but I think learning about the kind of person and leader that I wanted to be. And what I appreciated is I had the benefit, and it really was a benefit, a privilege, to be able to dedicate my time to learning without really having to worry as much about having a full-time job. I served a church part-time, but I didn't have to have a full-time job. I didn't have a high level of responsibility for other people in terms of a family and things like that. And so I think what I miss that time where I could just dedicate myself to kind of thinking, reflecting, and learning about the kind of leader I wanted to be without also having to do it over here. And I think one of the hardest parts about ministry, you know, we always joke around that we're trying to, you know, build the plane while we're flying it, or whatever metaphor you want to use. But there's always this conflict between the immediacy of the work that we have this week and I think the desire most of us have to step back and just have some time to think about it and kind of collect our thoughts and figure out who we are, who we want to be, where we need to grow. So I appreciate that about seminary. I miss that, that freedom to do that.
Yeah. It's kind of the curse in like sermon preparation of like, I could always dive deeper. And like seminary was like the time where like, I didn't have to apologize for that. And I was actually, it was going to benefit me if I did. And now it's kind of like, at some point I have to stop, you know, I can't read another book. I can't listen to another sermon or whatever else. I gotta stop. So I miss that too. I often like, you know, say like I miss school, and I think it's mostly that I miss. And also of course, like the people and the friends that I had there. And there's a lot of things I miss about that, but yeah, I resonate with that for sure. I had that same privilege, went right after college, and you know, probably won't get that opportunity again to just be totally devoted to school and not having to, you know, support, you know, paying rent and buying food and all that sort of stuff like I do now. So yeah. Well, we're at the end of the kind of long form questions. We have these 11 speedrun questions we ask every guest. And, you know, you don't have to give one word answers. You can give relatively short answers, but just some kind of more fun, lighthearted questions to kind of close out the interview. And so we'll get started with those. So the first one is fill in the blank. Ministry is blank.
Ministry is a privilege.
2, you are called to be brave, but your fear is real. What do you do?
You do it.
Love it. Yeah.
I mean, I could expand on these, Colin, but
right, you can if you wish. We have time, so if you wanna expand on that one at all.
Privilege. I try all the time. I'll just say this for pastors or professional ministry folks. You know, it takes a lot of work. The longer you're in this, you start to think maybe the church owes you something for all the long hours you put in. That and it's really dangerous when you begin to think that maybe God owes you something for everything that you've done. Yeah. And if we ever forget that we owe God everything, and I owe the church and the United Methodist Church so much in my life, the fact that it allows me to lead is a gift and a privilege that I always try to remember. Yeah, all the time. Bravery says do it. Fear says don't. What do you do? Well, you do it. I mean, I don't mean make dumb, uncalculated, unwise risks, but basically I wrote a whole book called Let Go, Leaning into the Future Without Fear. And the whole premise of the book was basically lean in, you know, lean into it. So that's my answer to number 2.
And it connects to your book Fail as well, about learning from failure as well. So
right.
You got to plug 3 of your books today.
Yeah, there you go. You can buy them at your local bookstore or Cokesbury or Amazon.
And we just recently at Memorial Drive got a Amplify subscription. So if you want to watch the video content for those, they're on there as well.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Third speedrun question: something people often get wrong about you.
Oh man, that's a good question. Probably, I think because I started the gathering and I was entrepreneurial in that sense, people often think of entrepreneurs or church start people as like all about vision and not really interested in detail. And, you know, I was a math major. I'm kind of a logical thinker. I actually, if I have any tendency, it's to maybe overthink in my private time the details of how we're actually going to make this work. So I think people sometimes get that wrong about me. They just assume I'm a big ideas person without a lot of, detail thinking.
The last TV show you binged and loved?
Oh, the last one that I've binged and loved. That's a good question. I'm hopping around between all sorts of them, but
you can name a few if you want.
My family is into spooky things, so my kids love Stranger Things. So if Stranger Things comes on, we always binge it. The Haunting of Hill House, the new sequel just came out. My kids are demanding that we watch that. I have some other mindless stuff that I like to watch. I've been watching Homeland with my wife, that Showtime show.
Yeah.
So that's what we're watching now.
All good ones. Yeah. Favorite movie?
Oh gosh, favorite movie. So it's a funny thing. I feel like with Netflix and with kids, I don't watch full-length movies anymore because they take too long but I will tell you my favorite movie from childhood, and then I'll tell you my favorite movie from childhood was Fletch, old comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's probably
Steve Martin. Yeah.
Yes. Great movie. And I just watched with my daughter, the movie about Enola Holmes, which is like,
yeah. Yeah. My wife and I watched that the other night. Really fun.
I thought it was good. So.
Lighthearted. Yeah.
Yes.
Number 6, a concert that you'll never forget.
Oh, my wife made me go to an Alanis Morissette concert, like freshman year of college. And I felt out of place, but I did it because I really liked her, and I ended up marrying her. So it was worth the investment.
Yeah. Never forget. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria by Beverly Tatum. It's a few years old now, but it's just a book about kind of conversations about race, and I found it to be helpful, enlightening, challenging.
What's on your bedside table?
Literally my phone, because I now have a college student, and I never know when. I feel even like it's even more important to have a phone with a ringer on. I used to always have my phone on vibrate when all my kids lived in the house, but they don't anymore. So I'm also reading Barbara Brown Taylor's Learning to Walk in the Dark, which is on the nightstand as well. And so those are the two things that are on my nightstand right now.
Awesome. A snapshot of a moment in your life that brings you joy.
I mean, there's the big obvious things. I have 3 kids. I've been married, I think I said 21 years. So, but I'll tell you something that brings me a ton of joy. My daughter, I get to go speak at various conferences, and I was speaking in Orlando. This was 5 years ago at a church start conference in Orlando. And I brought my daughter with me. And for like a couple days after, we went to Disney World. I'd never been to Disney World, neither had she. People told me it was a pain. It was, a lot of work and everything. I had maybe the most fun I've ever had in my life for 2 days, just me and my, at that time, 10-year-old daughter. And we had a blast together, and I'll never forget it. It brings me a ton of joy every time I think about it.
That's awesome. Tell me one thing you're deeply grateful for right now.
I'm deeply grateful for people in my life that have been so incredibly loyal and supportive of me and the ministry that I do. I get a lot of credit for the gathering because I started it, but there's a lot of people, my family, my wife, but beyond, who have invested and believed in it and have stuck with it. And I'm deeply grateful for that always.
And lastly, when our time here on earth is done, what do you hope the first thing is that God says to you when you reach heaven?
I mean, it's sort of trite, but that line, like, well done, good and faithful servant, I think probably somewhere deep in my soul, we could get into a psychoanalysis of this. Like, you want to know that what you did mattered, that you did a good job, that you pleased. There's probably at some level, I wanted to do well in school growing up. I wanted other people to respect the work that I did. And probably at some deep level, I hope that God says, well done. Yeah, I'm proud of the effort you gave and the work that you did. Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. That's the last speed round question. And I'm just personally grateful to get to connect, just as, watching what the gathering is doing is really inspiring to me as a pastor. And just grateful that you would set aside the time to let us pick your brain a little bit and hear from you and be encouraged by you. It means a lot.
Thanks, Colin. I appreciate that. And it's always good to see you as well. So thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. And thank you guys for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And I hope you guys are having a great week.
Thank you so much for checking out Soul Care. Join us again next week at noon on Friday. Have a great weekend. Bye.